This is Bernini, His Life and His Works, by Adam Westcott, Elizabeth Benoit, Daniel Dunlap, Anthony Gutierrez, and Eliza Lewis.
Bernini was born in Naples, in Italy in 1598. His artistic lifestyle began at a young age. He spent most of his adult life in Rome, which is a city where numerous architectural projects of his would eventually transform. He was noticed early of his talents, and he studied under the painter named Annibale Carracci. Bernini got the attention of Cardinal Scipione Borrassi, the nephew of Pope Paul V, who had high hopes for Bernini. He became the preeminent sculptor and architect of the 17th century and one of the greatest sculptors of all time. He spent most of his lifetime in Rome. From his early days as a child prodigy until his death in 1680, he lived to the age of 82, and he remained unchallenged as a four-master sculptor of his time. Bernini's design philosophy was extravagant to the extent where his sculptures employed shading and carving techniques that mainly rendered human figures in dramatic and lifelike details. Bernini was able to recreate human skin and anatomic muscular in detail in his marble sculptures. His design philosophy mainly deeply rooted in the principles of Baroque movement, which he sought to evoke intense emotions, drama, and dynamism in art and architecture. Bernini's instance that beauty should be found in observing humans and nature instead of studying classical statues or Renaissance paintings was a move of his that moved away from traditional ways of creating work. Another fact is that Bernini was heavily inspired by the theatrical. He wrote and directed and acted in plays, which helped with his designs in the future. Bernini implemented a lot more emotion, usually, of extreme tension, ecstasy, and agony. Much of Bernini's work ended up being commissioned by the Catholic Church. He often explored spiritual and religious themes in most of his art. Most of his sculptures had architectural designs that were frequently depicted in scenes from the Bible, saints, and other religious subjects, with mainly a sense of piety and devotion. Bernini saw sculpture, architecture, and painting as interconnected disciplines. He often integrated these different art forms with his architectural projects, creating harmonious compositions that really engage the viewer on many, many levels. This is a timeline of Bernini's works. His early career, he had a good start with most of his works that he made. A lot of them ended up being sculptures. I believe that's what he started out with. And as time went on, he created even more and more complex projects, eventually working his way into urban planning and more architectural projects. Later years, his works, you definitely see the difference in design. And as his life went on, you can see how more and more implementation of the things he learned along the way resided with each of his projects that he made until his death in 1680. This is another thing that I made here. It's a little timeline of his artworks. As you can see, as time went on, you can see his work gradually developing. He went from sculptures to then buildings and eventually exterior architectural work. As you can see, towards 1660, St. Peter's Colonnade was one of his larger projects that he made. And basically, this explains as well how his movement was influenced.
St. Peter's Colonnade. Bernini's work in St. Peter's Colonnade is a remarkable example of Baroque architecture and sculpture. Located in Vatican City, designed by Gian Lorenzo Bernini in the 17th century, consists of two semicircular colonnades that form an embrace around St. Peter's Square, represents the arm of a Catholic church reaching out to embrace the faithful. Influence and legacy. Bernini's work on St. Peter's Colonnade had a significant influence on the Baroque architecture, and urban design. The colonnade remains one of the most iconic and recognizable features of St. Peter's Square. It continues to be a symbol of the Catholic Church's presence and influence in the world. Bernini's design for the colonnade involved two rows of massive Doric columns forming a semicircle embrace around the square. He completed the project between 1756 and 1767. Bernini's design aimed to create a grand entrance to the St. Peter Basilica, emphasizing a magnificence of the church. The colonnades are made out of rows of Doric columns topped with a inverted balustrade. The column symbolizes the church's strength and unity. The colonnade consists of 4 rows of columns with 284 Doric columns and 88 pilasters, arranged in a double colonnade. The columns are made of transvertine marble and topped with statues of various saints. The colonnade is not a mere decorative, but serves a symbolic purpose. It represents the maternal arms of the church, welcoming all visitors into the embrace of the Catholicism. The embracing arms of the colonnade symbolizes the welcoming nature of the Catholic Church. The colonnade seamlessly integrates with the facade of the St. Peter Basilica, creating a harmonious transition from the square to the church. The design reflects Bernini's desire to create a space that would inspire awe and reverence in visitors. Bernini's masterpiece perspective is evident in the colonnade design. As visitors approach St. Peter's Square, the colonnade appears to open up like arms welcoming them, creating a sense of awe and grandeur. The colonnade is also designed to guide visitors' focus on the central basilica, emphasizing the importance of the seats of the Catholic Church.
The baldachin at St. Peter's Basilica is a beautiful synthesis of art and architecture and is one of the most iconic works of Lorenzo Bernini. Bernini was just 25 years old when he was commissioned by Pope Urban VIII to create this baldachin. Pope Urban wanted something to be built at the main altar, which is above St. Peter's tomb, and this would also be put under the cupola designed by Michelangelo. Pope Urban VIII believed St. Peter's Basilica to be the most important structure in Christendom, which is why he immediately commissioned Bernini to create a structure for its interior. He had seen the sculptors that he had done in the past and wanted something to the level of creativity, expertise, and craft that Bernini could produce. Although this project was created and envisioned by Bernini, he did get some help from a few people. His father Pietro, whom he would commonly work alongside, his brother Luigi, Borromini, and numerous other sculptors such as Agostino Radi, Stefano Speranza, and others. The design. The thoughtful and intricate design of this baldachin sets it apart from many other works. The inspiration for this structure comes from the papal baldachin, which is what the Pope is transported on when they speak. The square design allowed for Bernini to create 4 marble bases at the corners, which go up into these dynamic bronze columns. These columns have a twisting pattern that looks like they are twisting into themselves. The top of this almost 29-meter tall structure features a canopy made out of gilded wood. This canopy has elaborate and intricate decorations, which are meant to draw your eye upward to the heaven and to the divine. The decorations on the canopy include 4 angels, which took about 5 years to create, that are different Christian symbols, such as St. Peter's keys, the papal tiara of St. Peter, St. Peter's sword, and St. Paul's book. Why it's important. The technique of Bernini is spectacular and symbolizes a love for the church. The most spectacular part of this baldachin is the craft and artistry. Bernini was able to do what only a few sculptors are able to achieve. He could make this hard and dense material seem soft and dynamic. It appears as if Bernini molded the columns and the figures out of a malleable material such as clay, even though he in fact carved it out of a static and solid material. The technique of Bernini is something that has been studied for centuries and is something that I think we can all learn from. The amount and time and detail that him and his partners put into this piece is astonishing and something to be admired. The size and grandeur of this structure shows the magnificence of St. Peter himself, as well as Christianity. It serves as a symbol of the respect and admiration that the followers of Jesus had for the divine.
The next of Bernini's works that we'll be talking about is the Fumi Fountain. Fountain dei Quattro Fumi, or for short, the Fumi Fountain, is a fountain designed by Lorenzo Bernini. It is also known as the Fountain of the Four Rivers. It was constructed in 1651 for Pope Innocent X's family palace. It sits in the Plaza Novani in Rome, Italy. The concept of the Fumi Fountain is rather simple. It consists of four gods as figures underneath an Egyptian obelisk. The obelisk has the Pamphili family emblem with the dove with a twig on it on the top of it. The Pamphili family was the ruling family at the time. The four figures on the base of the fountain represent the four major rivers of the four major continents which the papal family had authority over. The Nile in Africa, the Dombe in Europe, the Ganges in Asia, and the Rio de la Plata in America. Alright, the Fumi Fountain is important because of what it symbolizes. Public fountains in Rome served multiple purposes. They started as highly needed sources of water for neighbors in the centuries prior to home plumbing. They were also made as monuments to the papal patrons and served as symbols of power. In the time when the Fumi Fountain was made, fountains served as meeting spots or a centerpiece of a town or a city. This comes from their origins of being the people's main and only source of water, which made it become a center or landmark of its area. By the time the Fumi Fountain was made, fountains were centerpieces, no longer due to necessity, but because of their elaborate designs and heritage. The Fumi Fountain depicts the Nile, Ganges, Rio de la Plata, and Dombe as deities, all overshadowed by a massive obelisk with Catholic symbols. And atop this, the Pamphili family crest or emblem. It's almost as if to say that Rome and the Church are above these gods, and the Pope of the Church above these, exhibiting supreme authority over all the four corners of the world.
From being discovered at an early age to being considered the favorite of Pope Urban VIII, Bernini enjoyed a practical lifetime of almost uninterrupted success. It was following the death of Pope Urban VIII and the succession of Innocent X that Bernini began to run into some struggles, being that Innocent X favored many of Bernini's rivals, including Borromini. This resulted in the cancellation of several towers that were supposed to be developed in St. Peter's and the actual destruction of one that was already built. Bernini correctly predicted a decline in his popularity as a more modernist, for that time, view began taking place. Bernini thought that the amount of dramaticism and the theatrics that he would put into his work, he thought of it as showmanship, but he saw that the more modernist of the time view on architecture and art would begin to shy away from that. And because of this, it's theorized that Bernini really strived to control some of his biographical works about his life, including the one done by his cousin. And Bernini wanted to establish his name as a legend, almost as legendary as the characters and the stories that he portrayed in his sculptural works and his architecture. He created, oftentimes without using a terracotta model, almost as if he was casting into stone what he had seen in dreams or visions in freedom of thought, and his dramaticism, his extravagance. It wasn't just limited to the generosity of his patrons. It was as seen by some of his uncommissioned works, which he poured great personal expense into completing. He did it for the art. He did it for his passion of creation. Throughout Bernini's life, he continually pursued this exploration of the organic, the natural, the soft and dynamic, expanding on what Michelangelo had done in his work and his fascination and studies of the human body, including elements like sheer drapery and organic leaves and trees and bark, elements of plants. Bernini was a highly original thinker and was unafraid to take risks. After being surprised by an uninvited Bernini, who had made a unsolicited model, which he then positioned in a room that he knew Pope Innocent X would be in. The enamored Pope, who was regularly favored Bernini's rivals, reportedly said, "The only way to resist executing his works is to not see them." His works combined his pursuits and his passions as a renowned painter, sculptor, dramatist, and architect, establishing the flair, dramatic elements, and the eloquence that the Baroque movement is so well associated with.